Hello guys, welcome to Africa Gossip Arena.
Okay, thank you very much. And like she said, we have a special guest who has come in graciously from Washington, D.C. to share his thoughts with us this afternoon. So everyone here agrees with me that Nigeria is probably the only country in the world facilitating external aggression against her indigenous populations. Is that a fair statement? Okay. Invading terrorists kill hundreds of indigenous populations, Afuta community. But instead of deploying their military to root out the invaders, Nigeria deploys its military against indigenous populations resisting the invasion. As such, Nigeria government has made Nigeria a massive killing field, taking hundreds of lives every day. For us to have a state that uses its military to defend her citizens, the independence of Biafra, the independence of the United States of Biafra is a necessity. On November 30th, that's just 2 days ago, we listened to perspectives from Michael Rubin, an advocate for freedom, who had written about Biafra self-referendum, the data you just shared, and the need for the incoming US President, Donald Trump. I know you guys love him. To pay attention to Biafra. Today we will listen to another Washington, D.C.-based advocate for freedom, Mr. Doug Bandar. He's a senior fellow at Cato Institute. He specializes in foreign policy and civil liberties. Doug has written extensively on issues bordering freedom and civil liberties around the world, and has written several articles on insecurity in Nigeria. Today, Doug will share his perspective on Biafra freedom, exit from Nigeria, its implications for security, and the role the U.S. government can play. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome Doug Bandar.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. This is a much more enthusiastic audience than I normally find in Washington, D.C. And I appreciate very much the opportunity to come. As you can imagine, for me, it's very unusual to be speaking about Nigeria in Lahti, Finland. Only very recently did I have a chance to meet and to speak with your ministers and discuss your cause. And I'm very glad that Michael Rubin spoke to all of you. I have great respect for him, and he writes about liberty and freedom around the world regularly in Washington. I have visited Nigeria and have been incredibly impressed at the people that I have met. As I traveled across Nigeria, I found people who were entrepreneurial, who worked extraordinarily hard, who were people of faith, people who cared for their families, and people with extraordinary potential. Yet I found that they suffered under a government that did not live up to its responsibilities to protect them and to protect those opportunities for them, and a government that in many cases seemed to be working against them instead of for them. Now, Nigeria, as anyone who looks at would recognize, is extraordinarily important, not only for Africa, but to the world. It has the largest population and economy in Africa. Africa itself is a continent of extraordinary potential, a growing population when most of the rest of the world, including America, have declining populations. But we see vibrancy and growth in Africa. And Nigeria has so much to offer, not only, to Africans, but also to Americans and to people around the world. I have occasionally gotten into to go to the airport, and my driver, it turns out, came from Africa. And we will discuss where he or she came from and what their home was like. And what I am particularly concerned about, like Michael Rubin, is concerned about human rights, about religious liberty, about economic opportunity, all of which are fundamental for human people everywhere on earth. And despite problems in my country, and as all of you recognize, all countries have some problems, and I accept with my own as well, the United States has done generally pretty good at trying to protect those opportunities and those liberties, which is why we've drawn people from Nigeria to America. But you shouldn't have to leave your country to have those opportunities. To me, that is the great tragedy that we see in Nigeria today, and for Biafrans, is the belief that to be fully protected and have full opportunity, that they must leave and go somewhere else. Now, you are enriching countries around the world, and that, I think, is wonderful, bringing knowledge of Nigeria, of Biafra, of Africa to Finland, to Europe, and to America. But again, you shouldn't feel you have to leave your homes to do so, and that is something which other people, other countries around the world should support you as you demand that those opportunities be protected. And we all know the problems that have occurred in Africa, in Nigeria. I don't have to go through them, you have lived them. In terms of internal conflict and violence, of misrule and dictatorship, of corruption, of political misbehavior, even of the current government. That the problems, unfortunately, there was great hope when the dictatorship ended. But if one looks at Africa and looks at Nigeria today, one sees it getting worse, not better. And that is wrong. And that is a threat to you all. It's a threat to your families back in Nigeria, and it's a threat to everyone who lives in Biafra. I think that it's important here, it's vital that these opportunities not be lost. An area that I care especially about is religious liberty, and I write about that an awful lot. And that's an area that I have great concern in what I see in Nigeria today. That again, there's a long history here, which I don't need to tell you because you have lived it. But it's recognized by some in America, and I think this is an important issue to address the new administration on. Because Donald Trump does care about religious liberty. It's an issue during his first term that he was concerned about. He received very strong support from many religious people in America. And this is the kind of issue that you can use to talk to the incoming administration about the importance of liberty in Nigeria, and also in that context then raise the cause of Biafra. That is not something which many people write about. Michael Rubin was an exception. But this is an issue that you can use to educate Americans. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, which is an independent body that studies religious issues around the world, told us last year that freedom conditions in Nigeria remained extremely poor. Violence across Nigeria impacted freedom of religion or belief as the government failed to prevent attacks against faith-based organizations and worshipers, with some accusing it of actually fomenting those attacks. So this is recognized. This is recognized in Washington. And of course, these kinds of attacks harm all Nigerians, everywhere in the country. But the attacks have been particularly focused on Christians. And that is something, again, that can be brought to the attention of the U.S. government, that this is a way to raise your cause. The challenge, I have to tell you, is today in Washington, every interest group and everyone is lined up hoping to get the attention of the new president who comes into office. So this will not be easy. So it's very important to find causes that this president and those around him care about. And I think that is going to be the biggest challenge for you all. It was obvious the Biden administration was not particularly concerned about these issues. Unfortunately, I wish it had been. I personally and my institute try to stay nonpartisan. We want to speak to anyone who we can in Washington about policy and engage anyone who's willing to talk to us. But looking at the record of the Biden administration, it was far too willing to deal with the established government and seemed unconcerned about fundamental liberties like religious liberty, and was prepared to dismiss attacks on Christians throughout the country as being part of rural disputes and climate change and other things, when in fact we can understand the deep roots of religion that those attacks reflected, and the fact that there are virulent terrorist groups active in Nigeria, where at times the government and government security forces have seemed as willing to attack the citizens of Nigeria as to protect them from those terrorist threats. So this, I think, is an important issue to bring forward. It's also important to address the Trump administration when it's trying to think about future friends in Africa. That Biafra would be a friend of America. And you are certainly making that case, and you need to ask those you know in America to make that case in America as well. Because again, Donald Trump is, shall we say, a very unique person. That's not always perhaps to America's benefit, but I think in this case, it's actually very useful. Because Donald Trump is willing to break with the status quo. I do a lot of work on issues like North Korea, and I thought one of the brilliant steps that Donald Trump took was a willingness to meet with the leader of North Korea that no other U.S. president had ever done. So that is something that you can appeal to him on, that perhaps he could meet with the leader of Biafra. That he recognizes the importance of reaching out to people who his predecessors refused to have anything to do with. Donald Trump, maybe there is an opportunity. And I also think those around him, many of those who are coming in, share that willingness to challenge the status quo. And that is what you suffer from. And I will admit, when I first heard about what you were doing, I'm old enough, unfortunately, to remember the terrible war. I was young, but I still remember pictures on TV and pictures of starving children, the horrors that happened with that. And you all know that. I suspect almost all of you had people who suffered in that, friends and family who died and suffered the horrors of that, which can never be repeated. But what the status quo in Washington then is, we don't talk about such things, right? We put them away in a closet somewhere, and we say that issue's finished, nothing to be done, please don't bother us, we have other things to do. And when you sit in Washington, I have to tell you, it's very tempting to it's kind of the ultimate imperial city, where American policymakers view themselves as kind of on top, and their job is to speak to the world and deliver their judgment. Now, I am not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell Nigerians or Africans what to do. I do not live your experience. I do not go through your experience. I have not suffered what you have suffered. I have not had the frustrations that you have had. So the last thing I would ever do is to try to tell you, as if I know better than you, what you should do. But I want to encourage you to speak out, because you can carry the message forward. And that message needs to go to Washington, D.C. And that message needs to go to the White House when there's a new president. It needs to go to the Congress. Now the U.S. Senate will be controlled by Republicans as well. There's a chance there. It needs to go to think tanks, which matter, people who spend a lot of time, they publish lots of stuff. They spend a lot of time thinking in theory, in meeting, but they need to hear your message, because today it's not a message that anyone really wants to talk about. But I think if you can get attention of the president, get attention of other leaders, this is an opportunity. And I want to encourage all of you, you have a cause that is just, a cause that is important. It is a cause that is compelling. And I think then nestle that within the larger argument. This is an administration, current one, where the president only now, as he is about a month and a half away from leaving office, decided to visit Africa. That apparently he looked at a map one day and said, oh, I guess I wasn't there. Now we need, with the new administration, a president who comes in and says, I should go to Africa. I need to look at Africa. I need to understand Africa. And a good place for him to start is Nigeria. And if he starts, he should not start thinking of Abuja. He should start thinking about the people of Nigeria, wherever they live, and understanding how that government in Abuja and its security forces are not serving the people of Nigeria. Because the ultimate responsibility of any government is to protect your safety, is to protect your opportunities, to protect your freedom to worship and to live and to speak, and to protect a democratic future where you can choose your leaders freely and live in a free and democratic society. And that's not being done today by the government in Abuja. And Nigeria could lead Africa. But as I indicated, it looks like it's going in the wrong way. Well, a free Biafra could lead Nigeria. So I want you to take that message to Washington, that listening to you is an opportunity for the United States to help improve Africa and help Africa lead the world. Because as I indicated, again, you look around the world, virtually every country is shrinking. I mean, one can look at Europe, and much of Europe could theoretically disappear. I mean, the estimates on fertility rates, it's extraordinary. Even at China, by the end of the century, people talk about China being maybe 400 million people rather than 1.4 billion. Africa continues to have vitality. Africa continues to have life, and for the future can show the way. And that is the very good reason for the United States to have a president start with a visit to Africa, not end with a visit to Africa. To turn it around and say, I'm starting with the future. I'm starting with the possibilities. I'm starting with the opportunities. And again, a good place to start, if that's your policy, is Biafra. So let me, as I indicated, I'm not going to tell you what to do. But it looks to me like you know what you want to do. And I want to commend you, again, for your enthusiasm, for your willingness to gather here, for your willingness you've chosen leaders, you're pushing referendum, you're taking steps to make this vision, this dream, into a reality. And I just want to encourage you on that journey. This is your journey, not mine. It's not Donald Trump's journey. It's not an America's journey. Unfortunately, the United States has pushed a lot of people on journeys that didn't work out. But if you start on the journey and you are making the journey happen, then you can come to America and say, help us. So I want to conclude with a vision of a democratic and prosperous African continent, a democratic and prosperous Nigeria, and a democratic and prosperous Biafra. This is up to you to turn that kind of a vision into a reality. And I'm so happy again to see so much enthusiasm and a willingness to gather and to push this vision. And I want to thank you for inviting me to come to speak to you. Because I have to tell you, as someone who's been involved in American politics for a very long time, and has grown a little tired and a little cynical about American politics, I find this energizing and for me to go back to America. So thank you, Godspeed, and have a blessed new year. Thank you.